When we talk about long-term trauma, most people imagine a single painful memory, a tragic moment that replays again and again in the mind. But the truth is far more complex. Trauma, when it lingers over years, is not just a memory, it becomes a blueprint. It rewires the nervous system, reshapes behavior, and alters the way a person exists in the world. To understand what long-term trauma does to you, we have to go beyond the surface, beyond the pain itself, and look at how it silently infiltrates every corner of your identity. Trauma that lasts is rarely loud. It's subtle. It hides inside your daily habits, your reactions, your silences. It becomes a shadow that follows you into every room, every conversation, every relationship. Think about it: someone who has lived through years of instability doesn't need to be told that the world is unpredictable. Their body knows it. Their mind carries it. Trauma becomes not just something they remember, but something they embody. This is why long-term trauma is so powerful. It transforms the baseline of how you experience life. For many, it manifests as hypervigilance, the constant scanning of the environment for danger. Even in moments of safety, the body refuses to relax. The nervous system is stuck in survival mode, always preparing for the next blow, the next betrayal, the next disappointment. Imagine trying to rest, but your brain keeps whispering, "What if something happens? What if you're not safe?" That is the silent exhaustion trauma brings, but it doesn't stop there. Long-term trauma alters identity. It creates what psychologists call a fractured self. Instead of seeing yourself as a whole, unified being, you begin to live as fragments. One part of you is the survivor, the version of you that endured the pain. Another part is the protector, the one who shields you from ever experiencing it again. And then there's often the hidden part, the wounded child, the vulnerable self that still aches, still longs for safety, love, or validation. These parts don't always agree with each other. Sometimes the protector pushes people away, while the wounded self desperately craves connection. That inner conflict creates confusion, self-doubt, and the feeling of being a stranger in your own skin. Think about relationships. Trauma does not just live in the past. It shows up in how you trust, how you love, how you respond to intimacy. If someone betrayed your trust years ago, long-term trauma convinces you that betrayal is inevitable. So you hold back. You avoid vulnerability. Or worse, you settle for relationships that repeat the same pain because deep down it feels familiar. This is the cruel paradox. Trauma makes unsafe environments feel normal, while safe environments feel suspicious. Another hidden effect of long-term trauma is what I call the emotional echo. Imagine dropping a stone into a pond. The ripples spread outward long after the stone sinks. Trauma works the same way. A painful event from 10 years ago can ripple into today's decisions, today's fears, today's self-image. You might hesitate to take opportunities because failure feels too threatening. You might overthink every word you say because you fear rejection. The past echoes into the present, shaping choices that should belong to you, but are still controlled by what happened long ago. And then, there is the armor. To survive, people build protective layers. Some hide behind humor, turning pain into jokes so no one sees the truth. Others become perfectionists, believing that if they do everything right, they can prevent harm. Some choose numbness, shutting down emotions altogether to avoid the risk of feeling too much. On the surface, this armor works. It keeps you functioning, keeps you moving forward. But over time, it also traps you. Because the same armor that shields you from pain also blocks out love, joy, and connection. Perhaps the most profound cost of long-term trauma is time. It robs years, not just because of the suffering itself, but because it steals presence. Instead of living fully in the now, you are constantly revisiting the past or bracing for the future. You're never fully here. And this disconnection, this inability to inhabit the present moment, can make life feel hollow, even when things are going well. So what does long-term trauma do to you? It changes your body, your mind, your relationships, your very sense of self. It weaves itself into your story until you can no longer tell where you end and where the trauma begins. And yet, hidden inside this painful transformation is also a strange kind of truth. What has been reshaped can, over time, be reshaped again. The nervous system that learned to fear can also learn to trust. The identity fractured by pain can be rebuilt into something stronger, more whole. But before we talk about healing, we must first see the full weight of the wound. We must understand not just what happened to us, but how deeply it has settled into who we are. Because only by facing the depth of trauma can we begin to imagine the possibility of transformation. When we peel back the layers of long-term trauma, we uncover more than just emotional scars. We discover how trauma embeds itself in the nervous system, creating patterns that dictate how we think, feel, and behave. It is not only psychological, it is physiological. Trauma lives in the body. Let's start here. When you experience prolonged trauma, your brain adapts. The amygdala, the part of the brain that detects threats, becomes overactive, always on high alert. The hippocampus, which processes memory, shrinks, making it harder to distinguish between past danger and present safety. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reasoning and decision-making, often becomes underactive, leaving people more prone to impulsivity or difficulty regulating emotions. In other words, trauma rewires the brain to survive, not to thrive. This explains why survivors often say, "I feel like I'm stuck in the past." The brain is literally locked in survival mode. Even when the danger is past, the body continues to act as if the threat is still there. A slammed door might feel like an attack. A simple disagreement might trigger the same panic as if your whole world were collapsing. These are not overreactions, they are the nervous system replaying old scripts. But trauma doesn't just live in the mind, it burrows into the body. Chronic pain, headaches, fatigue, digestive issues all can be linked to unresolved trauma. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Psychologists call this somatization, when emotional wounds show up as physical symptoms. That's why healing trauma often requires not just talking, but learning to listen to the body again, to release what has been trapped for years. Then comes the emotional toll. Long-term trauma is like carrying a weight you can't put down. For some, it leads to anxiety, endless worry about what might go wrong. For others, it leads to depression, a deep hopelessness that whispers, "Nothing will ever change." Some swing between both states, trapped in cycles of hyperarousal and numbness. This is not weakness, it is the body's way of trying to cope with too much pain for too long. Let's not forget the role of shame. Shame is often the most poisonous residue of trauma. It convinces people that they are broken, unworthy, or even to blame for what happened to them. Shame makes people hide their struggles, pretending to be fine while silently unraveling inside. And because shame thrives in silence, it becomes one of the most isolating effects of trauma. Relationships, too, suffer under the weight of long-term trauma. Trust becomes fragile. Intimacy feels dangerous. Some people withdraw completely, believing it's safer to be alone than risk getting hurt again. Others cling too tightly, fearing abandonment so much that they smother the very relationships they want to preserve. Either way, trauma distorts the natural rhythm of human connection, replacing it with fear, suspicion, or unhealthy attachment. And then there's identity. Trauma can shatter self-esteem. Survivors often ask, "Who am I beyond what happened to me?" They may feel defined by the abuse, the neglect, the loss. Their sense of self becomes tied not to who they are, but to what they endured. This identity crisis can last years, leaving people stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and confusion. Yet here's something profound. Even as trauma reshapes the self, many survivors develop hidden strengths. What looks like hypervigilance, for example, is also a sharp awareness of the environment. What looks like distrust is also a deep longing for authenticity. What looks like emotional numbness can sometimes protect against being overwhelmed. These are survival strategies. They come at a cost, but they also show the resilience built into the human spirit. Still, the cost cannot be ignored. Long-term trauma can keep people stuck in toxic environments. It can trap them in cycles of self-sabotage. It can silence dreams and suffocate potential. Because when you've lived in survival mode for too long, thriving feels impossible. You begin to believe that life is only about enduring, never about flourishing. But the truth is this: trauma may change you, but it does not define you. The nervous system can relearn. The fractured self can be pieced back together. The silence of shame can be broken. Healing is not about erasing the past. It's about reclaiming your future. And it begins with awareness, recognizing how deeply trauma has impacted you, and daring to believe that change is possible. As we move forward, we'll explore not just the damage, but the pathways toward healing. Because understanding trauma is only the first step. The real journey lies in transforming it, turning pain into strength and survival into a life worth living. To fully grasp the weight of long-term trauma, we must also examine the ways it shapes not just individuals, but entire generations. Trauma is not something that stays neatly contained within one person. It spills over. It passes down, often unconsciously, through behaviors, beliefs, and even silence. Psychologists call this intergenerational trauma. A parent who never healed may unknowingly pass down patterns of fear, avoidance, or anger to their children. In this way, trauma becomes a legacy, unless someone is brave enough to interrupt the cycle. But let's step back and talk about the individual journey first. Long-term trauma does something subtle. It distorts your sense of time. Many survivors live in what feels like a suspended state, neither fully anchored in the present nor free from the past. You might hear someone say, "It's been years, but it feels like it happened yesterday." That's because trauma collapses time. The body relives old danger as if it's happening now. The past is not gone. It's alive inside the nervous system. This creates a psychological prison. You may want to move forward, but every step feels chained to memories, sensations, and fears that keep pulling you back. It explains why people repeat the same patterns, even when they desperately want to change. The trauma is not just something you remember, it's something that remembers you. And yet, within this painful reality lies the possibility of growth. Healing begins the moment you stop asking, "Why can't I get over this?" and start asking, "What has this taught me about my own strength, my own resilience?" Because here's the paradox: trauma can destroy, but it can also reveal. It reveals the depth of what a person can endure. It reveals the hidden strengths forged in survival. It reveals empathy, compassion, and a deeper understanding of suffering qualities that often make survivors powerful healers, creators, and leaders. But let's be clear. Healing from long-term trauma is not a quick fix. It is not about moving on or forgetting. Healing is about integration, learning to weave the trauma into your story without letting it dominate your identity. This can involve therapy, somatic practices, mindfulness, supportive relationships, or even creative expression. Each path is unique, but they all share one common truth. Healing requires patience, and it requires courage. One of the most important steps in this journey is reclaiming agency. Trauma robs you of control. It makes you feel powerless, as if life happens to you. Healing is about slowly rebuilding that sense of power. Small choices, setting boundaries, speaking your truth, caring for your body become acts of resistance against the grip of trauma. Each step whispers, "I am no longer only a survivor. I am someone who chooses." Another crucial element is breaking the silence. Trauma thrives in secrecy. When survivors carry it alone, shame grows. But when they share their story, even in small, safe spaces, the shame begins to dissolve. Connection reminds us that pain does not isolate us forever. It can also unite us. And in sharing, others see themselves reflected, which creates a ripple of healing beyond the self. We also have to talk about forgiveness, not in the simplistic sense of forgive the person who hurt you. Forgiveness in trauma is often about yourself. It's forgiving yourself for the coping mechanisms you developed, for the years you lost, for the times you felt weak. It's recognizing that everything you did was an attempt to survive, and that survival itself is evidence of your strength. Ultimately, long-term trauma is a thief. It steals peace, trust, time, and sometimes even identity. But it does not have to steal your future. The journey of healing is not about erasing what happened, but about rewriting the meaning of what happened. Instead of seeing yourself as broken, you begin to see yourself as rebuilt. Instead of being haunted by what you endured, you learn to honor the resilience that carried you through it. So what does long-term trauma do to you? It changes you. It leaves scars. But scars are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you were wounded and that you healed. They are reminders not only of pain, but of endurance. And if you look closely, they can also be maps that guide you toward a deeper understanding of yourself and toward a life where you are not just surviving, but thriving. Because at the heart of it all, trauma may have shaped you, but it does not define you. What defines you is the choice you make next, the choice to heal, to stand, and to reclaim the life that is still yours.